All right, about a month away from camp. Yesterday, we got into the PFF offensive rankings, the top 32 in regards to the Texans. Again, PFF, not the gospel. There's a lot of things that they don't do well, including something on the defensive side of the rock, which is where we're going to focus. But it's also a good resource, good talking point. And if you don't take it as the gospel, it can be a good resource, an interesting thing to look at. And obviously, they're putting in work, and the more resources, the better. Last year, the Texans defense, they were 5th in yards allowed and 14th in points. Now, points per game is interesting because the margin between being 14th and top 5 is actually 2 points. Green Bay was 5th in points allowed per game, and they allowed 19.9. The Texans allowed 21.9. A good offense, more of a balanced offense can kind of help that, as well as the arrow pointing up in a lot of areas when it comes to the Texans defense. Let's just kind of reset what we said about PFF yesterday. I think it's very flawed in some ways, specifically in the secondary, especially on the inside when it comes to nickel guys. And I always use the example a few years ago. If you just read PFF, you would think that Tavier Thomas was one of the best corners in the league. I think that's anyone who actually watched the Texans. Yeah, he was a solid player, but calling him one of the better corners in the league is a little bit dramatic. And I think we'll kind of see that theme with PFF. They had 8 Texans ranked in the top 32 of their position rankings. A couple you can make a case could potentially be there next year. We'll get into that in a sec. The only position where nobody was ranked was, and I don't think this will surprise too many people, was defensive tackle. There's familiarity at defensive tackle. There's not a ton of upside, but the surroundings of the guys on the defensive line are such to where I don't want to say not as much as is expected, but they've just kind of looked at the resources elsewhere. They've paid Danielle Hunter. They traded for Will Anderson. They're eventually going to pay him. They drafted Derek Stingley in the first round. They drafted Kamari Lassiter in the second round. So DT is kind of where they've not really been able to invest as much in, or they've chosen not to. So it's really no surprise that no DT was ranked in the top 32. I will also add that the defensive depth with the Texans has improved significantly. At this time last year, we didn't know if they had a number 2 corner. Kamari Lassiter established himself as that. Safety position was a concern. It's actually one of the deeper positions on the roster and easily the most intriguing. We'll hear about a couple of those guys in a second. And linebackers kind of become intriguing as well, although you're not having the same conversations now that you were last year. But linebackers intriguing. They've also added some guys on the edge. So not only do you have a lot of guys respected that are starters, but the depth has improved significantly. Let's start on the edge. PFF has Will Anderson and Danielle Hunter ranked 9th and 12th. Then I think Will Anderson at 9, it makes sense. According to PFF, 4 of his 5 highest graded performances, they came in week 12 or later, including the 2 playoff games. 2 playoff games, he was fantastic. And the arrow's pointing up for Will Anderson. After this year, he'll be extension eligible. It would not surprise me to see him put in the same company as Max Crosby and some of the better edge guys in the league. He's looks a lot bigger and he seems a lot more comfortable. Going to have to stay on the field though as well. Danielle Hunter at 12. There's some advanced stats that have him in the top 3, top 2. He was kind of a Pro Bowl snub last year. He's not on Instagram and online as much as Max Crosby. But Danielle Hunter's there. You can make a case the Texans, you can make a case these guys could be higher up on the list. You can also make a case that the Texans, I don't even think it's a difficult case to make, that they have the top edge duo in the league. At the linebacker position, one guy ranked, that is Azeez Al-Shaair. He is 26th. His run stopping ability was the thing that really flashed. He had an 82.7 PFF run defense grade, which ranked 12th in the NFL. It was his second 80-plus mark in the past 3 seasons. So Azeez Al-Shaair, they brought him in as kind of a culture guy, kind of a trendsetter. You don't want to see him in coverage. We saw that against the Kansas City Chiefs. But Azeez Al-Shaair is a guy that should help. And you look at Henry To'oTo'o and the progress that he made last year. Christian Harris, Last year, he was the most popular name mentioned for breakout star. Now he's just kind of a guy that trying to find his way. DeMeco Ryans has said that he will be ready for camp. And if you get the Christian Harris that you got 2 years ago at the end of the season, then there's a good chance that he could be on this list this time next year. That's not too far-fetched to think. Cornerback, Derek Stingley, number 5 on the list. And this is the weak spot for PFF, I think. Derek Stingley, number 5. He has Sauce Gardner, Surtain ahead of him. They actually put Jalen Johnson ahead of him as well. Derek Stingley at 5, and then Kamari Lassiter at 31. Lassiter is right behind Cooper DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell, third among rookies in PFF advanced coverage grade, 15th among all CBs. And he led the NFL with a 45.2% completion rate allowed, despite probably getting challenged a lot because Stingley's on the other side, although quarterbacks do challenge Stingley. I think the interesting thing with Lassiter is, look, 1 year in, you have him as a top 31 corner on PFF, which, again, take with a grain of salt. But I think the arrow is definitely pointing up for Kamari Lassiter, and the way that you feel about these corners this year compared to last, especially given the fact that the corner run in last year's draft started before Lassiter was selected. I think you got to be geeked up about how good the cornerback position looks, especially at the top 2. The depth 3 down, not great, but 1-2, much like Will Anderson and Daniil Hunter, you can make a case it's the best in the league. The most depth on this team is the safety position. And the safety position is insanely deep. You have 3 guys in the top 32. CJ Gardner-Johnson, Jimmy Ward at 19. PFF, a lot of Texans fans don't like Jimmy Ward. PFF loves Jimmy Ward. And then you have Jaylen Petri at 21, which, again, this kind of goes back to that inside DB type of vibe. That's generous, but the safety depth is insane. What PFF said about CJ Gardner-Johnson, he played a career high in snaps last year at 1170, 77 PFF overall grade, ranked 14th among safeties, and 85.7 coverage grades last season, placed him 6th among 96 qualifying safeties. So that's a good pickup, especially given the fact that you traded Kenyon Green, who you were likely going to cut for him. Jimmy Ward, kind of a super sub now. Jimmy Ward, according to PFF, and I know a lot of Texans fans are really pounding the table and kind of questioning this. PFF says he's been one of the most consistent safeties in the league over the past decade, top 20 in PFF overall grade 5 of the past 6 seasons, 76.1 last year, 15th overall. And again, I think DBs, especially on the inside and at safety, is kind of the weakness of PFF. They get the elite right, but I think it's kind of a weakness, which, again, it's impossible to get all right. As far as Jaylen Petri, they say his run defense grade and coverage grade 18th among 98 qualifying safeties. So Jaylen Petri, obviously a new role for him last year with DeMeco Ryans, and a really interesting layout. Another guy who did not get on the list, Kaylin Bolock. I asked Kaylin Bolock what he thinks he needs to do to improve his game and be mentioned among the better safeties in the league. This is what he said a couple weeks ago at Texans mandatory minicamp.
DeMeco talked about it a little bit. What did you focus on most that you wanted to get better at?
Play recognition, knowing what to expect on down the distance, going out there so I could play faster instead of just really going out there and just playing on my athleticism, being a student of the game, and really taking advantage of all my opportunities. It's a lot of plays out there that I left on the field. I felt that if I would have made, I would have been in the conversations with the top safeties that everybody talk about.
So there you go. And I think there are a couple of guys that could be on this list next year. I think Kaylin Bolock and Christian Harris are 2 to watch. It's just a matter of being on the field with Christian Harris. You're going to have a lot of talent around you. We don't know, and that is a big if. It's not a small if. That's a pretty big-ass if when it comes to Christian Harris. Bolock, he's already got the ball hawking skills, the play recognition, and everything there, and all the safeties he has around him. So PFF giving the Texans defense a little bit more love. No surprise there. Did they get anything wrong? Subscribe, like, ride along. We're a month away from camp. I'll be on the scene. I can hardly wait. It's the downtime. Embrace debate. PFF. Got a lot to say about the Texans. Some good things when it comes to the defense, though. Always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Appreciate y'all for coming through.